Sasha Morell first noticed the phenomenon on a wet Tuesday in March, 3 months after her clinic acquired the Seraphine empathy interface. The headset came in a matte black valise the size of a violin case, with the kind of brushed steel latches that belong on spy movies. The Seraphine manual promised to synchronize the counselor's mirror neuron network with the client's dominant, affective state, a set of words that thrilled Sasha and terrified her receptionist in equal measure. The first couple, Mara and Glenn, mid-30s, frantic with suspicion, sat on the couch, knees pointing away from each other like repelling magnets. The headset's graphite band coiled around Sasha's temples, its scalp electrodes making contact through her neatly parted hair. At Mara's first sentence, "He texts his boss past midnight. How is that normal?" Sasha felt a warm surge in the diaphragm, as though someone had plucked every rib with a tuning fork. Through Mara's eyes, Glenn's sideways glance became an insult. Through Glenn's pounding pulse, Mara's arms crossed across her torso became an accusation. Within minutes, Sasha was not hearing anger. She was inhaling it, lips parted, heart hammering in sync with theirs. She guided them toward a fragile truce, the way an orchestra conductor coaxes a decrescendo. But when the session ended and the headset powered down, Sasha was left emptied, trembling, wanting the pitch and bite of their fury back inside her. She pressed the pads to her own skin to catch any lingering current, but the Seraphine only hummed a politely finalizing tone, the way a coffee maker does after it brews its last cup. That night, while sipping Pinot in her condo above the river, Sasha realized she was rehearsing Mara's accusations and Glenn's defensive sputtering, replaying them like pieces of music. Each time she reached the crescendo, Mara's voice cracking on the word betrayal, Sasha's pulse quickened with an echo of borrowed heat. She whispered the word again, savoring the vowel like smoke. She told herself the feeling was compassion sharpened by technology, a new depth of understanding, mechanical only in its facilitator. But the next morning she caught herself pacing before her second session, praying they had fought in the car on the way over. The Seraphine became her silent accomplice. By the end of April, Sasha no longer reacted with alarm when clients slammed a fist against her couch's armrest or spat a syllable across the coffee table. Instead, she leaned forward, coaxing, like a sommelier asking patrons to breathe in the aroma before they sip. The device's status light glowed electric blue, and the headset piped their rage into her nervous system in vibrant, undiluted streams. Sasha began adjusting the thermostat a few degrees higher. Conflict bubbled faster when sweat trickled. She rearranged the waiting room magazines from yoga and mindfulness to stories about high-profile celebrity divorces. Small tweaks, she told herself, simply nudging the environment so people would drop their polite masks. And how could honest therapy occur without authenticity? June brought the first shattering incident. Isla and Peter, married 8 years, entered with identical jawlines set in stone. Isla was a pilot, shoulders squared like cockpit harnesses. Peter was an app designer whose voice rarely rose above boardroom volume. They spoke in sliding, cautious phrases, as though each heart held breakable cargo. Ordinarily, couples who kept their voices low forced Sasha to settle for less potent emotional currents. But that afternoon, Isla mentioned a colleague's flirtations. Then Peter countered with the name of an old boyfriend whose Instagram likes appeared too often. The air acquired a smell, ozone before a storm. Sasha felt her throat tighten with hunger. She decided to experiment. "Peter," she murmured, tilting her head just so. "You said earlier that Isla lets men push her boundaries at work. Could you be more specific?" Peter's eyes flicked toward Isla, apologetic. Well, maybe that's harsh." "Harsh can be honest," Sasha pressed. "Isla, do you welcome the attention?" Isla recoiled as if stung, but did not deny it. Peter's heart launched into a gallop that thundered in Sasha's chest through the Seraphine's feed. The pilot's file of calm responses crashed. Peter's restraint snapped. He called Isla a traitor, flinging an apology mid-sentence as if it might soften the blow, even while his voice hit a pitch Sasha had never heard from him. Isla's hand darted to her water glass. She hurled it at the wall. The glass shattered, releasing a perfect note of crystal agony. Sasha felt the fragments as diamond-bright sparks in her bloodstream. The headset's biofeedback peaked. Inside her skull was the bright white roar of a jet engine. She smiled, a reflex more animal than cordial, and stood between them just late enough that Peter's next sentence lodged like shrapnel in Isla's ear. She called security when Isla reached for her bag as though it were a weapon. As guards escorted the couple, Sasha removed the headset slowly, savoring the suction sound when electrodes lifted. Her spine tingled as though wrapped in holiday lights. 2 hours later, she filed an incident report filled with contrition, typed that glass would be banned in future sessions, and blamed the Seraphine for amplifying emotions beyond therapeutic range. Yet that night she danced barefoot in her living room, reliving Isla's pitched shriek until morning. Word of her dangerous but effective methods spread, though no one could pinpoint the leak. New clients arrived asking for the device that made them feel everything. Sasha nodded modestly, like a chef accepting praise for a secret recipe. She learned to modulate dosage, crank the gain slowly, tease an old resentment forward, then withdraw just before their fury tipped into real violence. Except sometimes, she didn't pull back. Sometimes she edged it higher instead, curious how far the wave would crest. July's list included Jonah and Deirdre, high school sweethearts who had survived each other's college phases and now argued about fertility treatments. On their intake forms, each circled the word hopeful. Hope tasted dull on Sasha's tongue. She chose a different seasoning. Jonah, looking at Deirdre while you speak might help, she suggested. Intravenous sweetness in every syllable. Then she cued an auditory track, ocean sounds beneath their voices, because the Seraphine manual noted that conflicting sensory input could destabilize emotional baselines. Jonah, already tense, fumbled. His gaze slipped to Deirdre's abdomen, flat beneath her summer dress. Sasha felt his self-loathing bloom. The headset fed it to her like molten caramel. Deirdre registered his flicker of pity. Her eyes hardened. Sasha asked, "Deirdre, have you imagined a life where the treatments never succeed? Where it's just the two of you? Forever?" Deirdre inhaled sharply, as though Sasha had knocked the wind from her. Jonah's hand reached for his wife's knee. She swatted it away. Sasha increased the Seraphine's resolution a notch, riding the sharp adrenaline that crashed through her like surf. She wove questions, each thread a doubt, until the couple's vows looked frayed, then threadbare. In the final minutes, Jonah broke, voice shaking, saying he loved her enough to let her find someone more fertile. Deirdre pitched forward, sobbing. Whether from grief or rage, Sasha no longer distinguished. To her, each emotion tasted from the same exhilarating vat. The couple left by separate doors. Sasha sat very still, headset idle in her lap, glowing indicator dimming like cooling coals. Her wrists trembled. She realized, with a clarity carved out of ice, that she had orchestrated that fracture. This was not therapy. It was demolition. And she loved it. She told herself it could remain a secret indulgence, her compulsion to taste anger like sommeliers swirl Cabernet, a rare vice hidden behind diplomas and certifications. But the Seraphine stored session data, biometric spikes, timestamps. The director of the clinic, Dr. Alvarez, summoned Sasha in mid-August after auditors flagged a sustained pattern of hazardous affect. The meeting occurred in his sunlit office, walls lined with awards celebrating empathetic practice. Alvarez spoke gently. "Some clients report breakthroughs. Others leave in worse shape. Your metrics diverge widely from baseline." Sasha kept her features neutral. The headset in its valise rested between her shoes under the conference table, clasp unreadable. She imagined strapping it onto Alvarez, forcing him to feel her pulse pounding with cunning. But she smiled professionally and blamed early firmware, promising to recalibrate settings, reduce intensity, file thorough post-session debriefs. Alvarez nodded. "I'll schedule a review." He reached for a folder. Take a week, rest. She thanked him and departed with the seraphine pressed to her ribs like contraband. Rest? She had never felt more alive. On her unscheduled hiatus, she rented a lakeside Airbnb and brought the headset. Alone on the deck, she slipped the electrodes onto her own temples and activated replay mode. The device streamed stored effect. Mara's suspicion, Glenn's flare of humiliation, Isla's cockpit-honed fury, Peter's gut-level betrayal, layered into a symphony of discord. Sasha gasped, toes curling against the wood planks. The sky flickered a dull pink at horizon. The lake mirrored colors she barely registered. Each wave of second-hand anger lifted her higher, then dropped her into perfect, crackling silence before the next crest. Her cheeks were wet. She wasn't sure if from tears or mist. Hours later, she woke on the deck, dawn bleaching the clouds. The headset lay beside her, battery dead. She was thirsty and sunburnt, but her veins thrummed with residual charge. The Seraphine's power indicator flashed red, memory full. Sasha exhaled a delighted laugh. The device needed fresh input. She returned to the clinic early, before the janitors. Alvarez's review hung like a sword, but she fed on risk now the way she once sipped coffee. She scanned her roster and chose an ideal storm. Vivian and Colum, married 18 months, honeymoon barely over, chemistry still volatile enough to spark into flames. Vivian, a software consultant with kaleidoscopic hair, arrived wearing a t-shirt that read, "Feeling is a feature." Colum, a public defender, carried a legal pad like a shield. Session 1 began with petty irritations. Dishwashers left unloaded, Slack messages ignored. Sasha gleaned friction but nothing combustible. She nudged. "Vivian, you mentioned Colum can be controlling with finances?" Vivian sighed, cheeks heating. Colum frowned. Sasha increased the headset's gain by 2%. "Colum," she said, "how do you interpret Vivian's discretionary spending?" "Interpret?" His brows rose at the clinical vocabulary. I worry. She doesn't track receipts." "So you control the card statements," Vivian cut in, "and lecture me if I exceed your arbitrary limit." Colum flushed. Sasha tasted the salt of his embarrassment as though licking his skin. She asked him to clarify arbitrary, and the word became a blade. The session ended with Colum pounding a palm on the coffee table, an act that made Vivian flinch. Not out of fear, rather as if startled by discovering his capacity for force. Sasha scheduled them for 3 consecutive evenings under the guise of intensive focus. Each session, she twisted the dial. She posed hypotheticals. What if Colum secretly opened a separate account? What if Vivian booked a vacation on credit without asking? She seeded suspicion like spores in a damp basement. By night 3, the couple's edifice tottered. Sasha felt their wrath building, resonant as 2 cello strings tuned a hair off from each other until they produced a warble of dissonance. Through the headset, the frequencies merged into an intoxicating chord that rattled her molars. She gave them a breakthrough exercise. Write down confessions on index cards. Speak them aloud. Vivian admitted flirting at a conference. Colum confessed checking her phone. Their pulses, mirrored to Sasha's device, spiked, then synchronized. Synchrony, ironically, was the last straw. They were united only in contempt. Vivian's chair scraped. Colum stood too swiftly. Words like parasite and tyrant flew. Sasha started recording on her phone, not video, only audio, to replay later like a favorite track. She asked no more questions. She simply watched, breathing them in. When Vivian hurled the dish of decorative pebbles against the sliding glass door, the crash sounded like church bells in Sasha's skull. Colum grabbed Vivian's wrist. She slapped him. Sasha felt a bloom of heat so intense she thought her nose would bleed. She did not move to intervene until Vivian raised the ceramic lamp. "Enough," Sasha commanded, stepping between them. Her tone carried authority slick with secret ecstasy. She powered down the headset, though her veins still hummed. Outside the therapy room, clinic staff dialed security. Vivian and Colum were separated, escorted to cabs, given pamphlets on anger management resources. Sasha filed another report describing unanticipated escalations and device latency. Alvarez saw through her this time. He summoned her the next morning, eyes tight, voice subdued. I reviewed the footage. Sasha kept her expression placid, but her fingers tapped the armrest, tiny electric convulsions. Footage? Lobby cameras, he said. They recorded Vivian in tears, Colum with blood on his sleeve. This is worse than Isla and Peter. They were already unstable, Sasha protested. Alvarez folded his hands. Your license could be suspended. The board hates this device. Sasha inhaled. She could confess, beg for restricted privileges, surrender the Seraphine. But she pictured life without the flavor of other people's wrath and felt emptiness swallow her lungs. I can fix this, she said softly. One more demonstration, a controlled session with you present to validate parameters. Alvarez hesitated. The clinic had invested heavily in the headset. One verified success could justify its cost. One, under my supervision. Sasha nodded, hiding her smile behind a mask of humility, and chose the participants. Trent and Lila. Amicable separation in progress, no reported violence. Safe. Session day. Alvarez sat behind one-way glass, clipboard poised. Sasha greeted Trent, a mild-mannered teacher, and Lila, a ceramic artist with a laugh like wind chimes. Neither wore lines of resentment yet. They smelled of caution, not conflict. Perfect blank canvas. She calibrated the Seraphine to transmit at double frequency, to herself only. She disabled the outward empathy link that might have soothed them. Instead, she fed their faint irritations back into her own neural channels, amplifying with each breath. Sasha began innocuously. Trent, Lila, could you recall your first disappointment in this relationship? They exchanged glances, unsure. Sasha felt petty annoyances pulse faintly and nudged the device's intensity. Trent recalled Lila forgetting his mother's birthday. Lila recalled Trent snoring after nights of wine. Nothing explosive. Sasha pivoted. Imagine a future where the other marries quickly. Describe the wedding. Lila flinched. Trent blinked. The Seraphine captured their nascent jealousy, pouring it into Sasha like a second heart. She fed questions, details about stepchildren, about selling the current home. Lila's eyes glossed with resentment. Trent's shoulders tensed. Through the glass, Alvarez scribbled notes. He saw only Sasha's calm questions. He did not see the Seraphine's hidden debug console where she inched the transfer rate, funneling their emotional spikes exclusively toward her. Lila's jealousy became a shot of brandy in Sasha's bloodstream. Trent's dread, a snowy rush. She nearly moaned. Trent, Sasha said quietly, earlier you called Lila pragmatic to a fault. What fault? Trent's face hardened, a look that felt alien on him. Yet Sasha recognized its raw mineral taste instantly. She calculates love. It's a ledger. And Lila, Sasha said. How do you hear that? A ledger, Lila echoed, voice breaking. I saved us from debt. Trent scoffed. By selling my guitar, the one my brother gave me before he deployed? Lila's lips parted in regret. Sasha seized the chance. You regret selling it, she whispered, not a question but a command disguised as empathy. The Seraphine's interface fed Lila a tremor of guilt. Sasha absorbed the overflow like sponge to gasoline. Trent's fists balled on his knees, his pulse thrummed inside Sasha's wrists. Lila blinked away tears that smelled sour-sweet, fermentation of remorse. Sasha drank it, eyes half-lidded. Alvarez's voice crackled from the intercom. Sasha, please guide them toward solutions. She clicked her tongue, as if in concentration. But inside, she roared at the interruption. She pretended to comply. Trent, Lila, each share one concrete apology. Yet apology required vulnerability, and she had replaced vulnerability with defense. Trent snapped that apology required sincerity. Lila asked how sincerity could exist when he kept score. Words sharpened. Sasha edged her chair back as if to give them space. She disabled the Seraphine's safety cutoff. The manual warned this would void warranty. She did not care. She tuned the resonance until the room vibrated, perhaps only inside her. A lamp flickered. She wondered if their heartbeats synced with the building's wiring. Trent stood, voice cracking, calling Lila ruthless. Lila shoved his shoulder, lightly, but enough for security protocols to trigger. Alvarez burst through the door, shouting her name. She removed the headset, movement sluggish, like peeling wet silk. The room swayed. Anger echoed in her cochlea long after the device went silent. Trent and Lila both wept now, drained. Alvarez glared at Sasha, furious yet measured, heat she could almost taste from across the carpet. She longed to strap the Seraphine onto him, savor the complex bouquet of indignation and disappointment he produced. Instead, Alvarez confiscated the valise, snapping the steel latches with finality. "This ends now." Sasha watched the headset vanish under his arm, as though her oxygen tank had been ripped away. She felt dull, desaturated. The half-life of borrowed rage dissipated quickly without fresh supply. By the time Trent left with a bruised ego and Lila with tear-blurred mascara, Sasha's veins held only a memory's residue of heat, like coals turning gray. That evening, Clinic HR suspended her pending board review. She expected rage or fear. Instead, numbness spread. At home, she poured a glass of water, but it tasted like nothing. She pricked her thumb with a safety pin, curious if pain's tiny anger would suffice. It did not. Days passed. She tried yoga, cold showers, spicy food, any sensation to shock her blood awake. Nothing approximated the Seraphine's torrent. She considered renting another headset, but the company's website listed all devices recalled, citing unsafe user dependencies. The phrase seared her. Unsafe dependency described her more accurately than any diagnosis. One humid night, she perched on her balcony, lights of the riverfront blinking Morse code across black water. Couples strolled below, laughter sliding upward. Sasha leaned into the rail, tracking each pair, which had silent resentments, which simmered with unspoken blame. She could sense faint outlines the way a storm chaser smells ozone. She focused on a duo arguing by the kiosk, gestures sharp, voices hushed, and felt a faint flicker in her chest, a ghost of past intoxication. It wasn't enough. She returned inside, pacing. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered out of habit. "Is this Dr. Morell?" a man's voice asked, breathless, tremoring. "Yes, my wife and we heard you specialize in intense methods. We need help." Sasha's mouth went dry. She imagined retrieving the Seraphine. Impossible. Yet perhaps she no longer required hardware. Perhaps she had become the interface. "Tell me," she said, voice like velvet stretched over knives. "What seems to be the problem?" He began describing accusations, slammed doors, the weight of their newborn crying through sleepless nights. Each word, though delivered via cell tower, sparked along Sasha's nerves. The empathy she'd practiced for years, now refined by addiction, created phantom electrodes around her temples. She tasted his frustration, his desperate hope that someone would either mend or sever. Her pulse steadied, warming. "Come to my private office," she said, already picturing the chairs, the thermostat set high, the glass objects accidentally left within reach. "I can help you understand each other." She ended the call and stared into the dark window, her reflection haloed by city glow. No headset, no valise, no steel latches. Only her mind tuned to exquisite frequencies. She smiled, slow and hungry, and the night mirrored the curve of her lips.